Hello, I'm Mike Manival with the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. We are pleased to be joined today by Mark Mussina, Democratic nominee for Lycoming County Commissioner. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Mussina, what can the county government do within the next 4 years to achieve property tax relief?
Um, you know, it's an interesting question because I know property tax is personal to every homeowner or business owner because it plays directly to them. But when you look at the whole pie as a whole, there are lots of things that contribute to our tax base that we get money from the state government or money from the gas industry. And some of these are temporary. And one of the concerns that we keep hearing is we're spending all this money, we're budgeting all this money, but these programs stop. And what happens when we've kind of counted on this money and then these programs stop? So the property tax is just a portion of it. And it would be wonderful if we could, get property taxes, whether it's relief or whether we get rid of it. I know people have talked about casino money, and I know people have talked about toll money, but we have to make sure that we don't eliminate things at our own detriment, because not all the funding, so much of the funding that we get for this county comes from outside of the county. And when that money stops, or if that money stops, we still have to be able to run the county efficiently. So it is a delicate balance, and we kind of have to look at all sides of it before. But of course, everyone would love to have their taxes cut. That's the first reaction.
Should property tax relief be targeted to homeowners or elderly homeowners, or should it be pursued more broadly for all residential, commercial, industrial properties, and why?
Well, I think the property tax relief for elderly and for individual homeowners comes in an indirect way. One of the issues we have is nonprofits, which people think of nonprofits as there are lots of good-hearted, everything for the community, but there are lots of businesses that for tax strategic purposes list themselves as nonprofit that make buku bucks that then don't pay a lot of taxes on it. And that is, when we don't get the tax money from these, and these are companies that make, millions and billions of dollars. So not locally, but one of the NFL is a nonprofit organization, which just doesn't make any sense to the common person because they make so much money. So there is money out there that could be taxed, and we have to look at reasons why we're not taxing them. The other aspect is because we haven't done a reassessment in so long, and that people immediately thought is, I don't want my properties reassessed, and I get that. But there are other properties, there are recreational properties that have increased in the last 20 or 30 years tenfold, that they're being taxed at like $40,000 that are selling for $400,000. So if we taxed those houses properly, then the lower income and the people whose houses have not increased that much would not be affected. So the benefit to the elderly and the middle class and the lower middle class is just by appropriately taxing the people who have the money, who've made the money.
What is one program or service for which the county could cut spending, and what is one program or service on which the county should consider increasing spending?
Well, the one to cut spending is the county could stop suing itself. With the commissioners and the controller, I think we're up to $250,000 in lawsuits over legalese. And when you talk to people outside, they just don't get it. Because, one group has a job, the other group has a job. It should be pretty well defined. To most of us, we think, tax law is pretty much, cut and dry. So why there's this great debate over who can handle what and who gets to approve what, it just seems like that's $250,000 that could have been spent in many better ways. There's always lots of programs. I think society's coming to grips with the fact that we need much better mental health care. Especially, we've seen veterans and people at that part of life, and now we're seeing with kids with the social media and the positives and negative effects, and we're realizing that while adults see the positive and negative effects, there's a lot of negative effects on kids. And we're going to have to be more proactive with that because they're dealing with something that, quite frankly, when we were kids, we didn't have to deal with. So we're not as equipped to it, and we're not necessarily as in tune to it because the kids are way more on the cutting edge of technology than we are. So that is certainly something that we need to follow, because as we know, like the bullying when we were kids stopped when kids got home from school, and now it can be 24/7. And it's a much more, technology's made it a much easier time in ways, but it's also made it a much more dangerous time in ways as well. And also programs for kids in general. I just had this discussion with someone the other day that we try to run these summer programs or things for kids to do, and it's like 2 weeks and then they move on. We need perpetuated programs that help some of these kids, especially in the underserved or underprivileged, so they have a chance to grow with it. And so it's not just like a babysitter or a time passer, but they're real programs that can help the kids flourish and can change their lives and help them become productive adults.
How can the county better assist municipal police services?
That's a fascinating question, because I know that when you look at state police and that not every when Toursville has borough police, Old Lycoming Township has police, but like Loyalsock doesn't. So one of the things that each municipality should look at, and I'm sure they have, is what is the pros and cons of having your own police force and the cost of it, as opposed to just using the state police force and increasing the state police force. But obviously those are budgets that I don't have access to, that and smarter people of me have already looked at it and examined it. But it because of so much of our area is covered by the state police, and you get out, especially in the rural areas where there just these townships that they don't have their own local police force. It's something that needs to be they need to work together well, and it seems like it does. I don't know if crime outside in the boroughs, like I live in Toursville, and crime it picks up every now. All of a sudden you see some car break-ins, and it seems to be trendy, but on a day-to-day basis we don't feel like safety's an issue. So I don't know if it's pockets. I don't know if it's one of the questions that was asked to us at our forum was about crime. And I think when people discuss crime, they immediately think of the city. And the city has their own police force. The city has their own mayor, and the city has their own city council. So the county commissioners' oversight of that, we need to work together better with the mayor and with city council, because I think sometimes the commissioners kind of feel like you take care of the city and we'll take care of everything else, but the city's the biggest part of the county. So there needs to be a greater cooperation there between the two.
What improvements or changes to the county's criminal justice system, whether it be the courts, prosecutors, or supervisory services, should the commissioners recommend?
I think one of the things that we do really well here already is drug court, which they just celebrated. I think it's its 30th year, and it's there is something here. There's a compassion for people who are struggling because of addiction, and I think that not only, I say it needs to be continued. I don't know if it even needs to be improved, but it needs to be continued, because I know we're lucky here that we have it. Not every county has that. I know in juvenile, I think that there's a lot of, there would be substance there as well, but I think a lot of it's socioeconomic situations. And the best way for us to help these kids to stay out of trouble and stay off a life of crime is to give them real opportunities in life to succeed, as the rest of society does. And so much of opportunity is socioeconomic based. And I know we always talk about, everybody in America has the opportunity, but some people's opportunities are way better than others. And some people get second and third opportunities, and, some people don't. And So those are the better that we can help the programs with the youth, whether it be through youth probation or the youth penal system. But like I said before, outside of with real programs that help the kids grow and develop life skills, the better we take care of that, then it's just something that perpetuates down the road.
How can the county commissioners encourage job creation?
One of the things that I just had a meeting with the Municipal Water Authority, and they talked about how much their capabilities are to bring industry here. Because with all industry, obviously you need water for both, supply and disposal. And they've talked about that the capabilities of their system is we could bring in lots of industry. And, I know everyone talks about bringing in jobs and they want to. I know the immediate thought is tax cuts, but then when you cut taxes, then people are upset that the companies are making that the companies making all this money aren't paying their taxes. One of the issues with it is about housing. And there's this catch-22 of we want good jobs, but we need good houses for these people. They're not going to come and take good jobs if they don't have anywhere to live. So, and right now we're at a housing, I don't want to say shortage, but it's interesting. It's really tough to build right now because building materials are so expensive, and because of the gas industry, people don't want to give up land and they don't want to create new development. So we have to figure out ways to refurbish what we have. And again, part of that would be bringing industry to the city, because then it brings more money to the city, and then we can refurbish some of the living areas in the city that once were extremely nice, and now they're not.
How else can the commissioners encourage the construction of new housing?
I've always thought, and I've been in real estate, I've been in education. One of the things that I thought was to take, whether it's VOTEC kids or, there are lots of kids who don't thrive in the classroom with the chalkboard, with the academic environment, that they need to be using their hands, they need to be active. And to take places where buildings are run down or buildings are dilapidated, and in real estate, I've seen this, so many times, and to come up with a program that takes these kids and teaches, 15, maybe 14, 15, 16-year-old kids how to drywall, how to lay flooring, it's a life skill that they can have forever, even if it's just to save themselves money down the road. But in society, we have an incredible shortage of blue-collar workers, whether it's plumbers or electricians or pipe fitters or just general contractors. So we could teach these kids life skills that could turn into a career. While doing so, we're renovating parts of the city, even if it's one building at a time. And I know it won't be like a contractor group that can get in and out. It'll take longer because it's a teaching process. But there's a long-term effect to it. And it's also slowly, we could rebuild this. And you could rebuild one, and then you could either sell it and take the profit and buy materials for the next one, or whatever the case may be. But there is a need to teach this next group of kids, because back years ago, everyone used to be handy because it was society demanded it. Your dad was handy. When something broke, you fixed it. And now we've got to a place where there's so few people who can actually fix things. And teaching these kids this would help them, and refurbishing some buildings that were dilapidated would help the city.
What is the most important attribute or characteristic of a county commissioner?
I think it is the ability to cooperate. I never wanted to run for public office because I hate the fighting and the angst between the left and the right. And being a Democrat from Montoursville, I think the county-wide, it's 70% Republican, 30% Democrat. And I see the tension. I felt the tension. And, but most of my friends are Republicans, and I've figured out you can still get along. And that's the way my life has always been. I think, I'm proud to the fact that I feel like I can get along with almost everyone, even if we disagree. I was a basketball coach in Montoursville, and I was named the most sportsmanlike coach by the referees. So if you're a basketball coach and you get along with the referees, I think that's saying something. So, and I know I had a lot of yard signs in front of Republican houses and in front of Republican businesses. And at the end of the day, it is a bipartisan committee. And for a bipartisan committee to function as well as possible, we all need to get along together. Now, yes, we're going to have different beliefs, and that's just the nature of life. And you have that in every household, even with husbands and wives. They have different beliefs, and they have to figure out how to get along. But it's important to work together. And I know one of the things that I've dealt with is people always ask, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" And I think when you're electing and when you're putting people in these positions, the great question is what's unknown that's coming down the road, that when something happens that was unforeseen, do you have people there that can work together to fix it? Nobody saw the pandemic coming. Nobody saw the flood back in 2011, the 500-year flood. So it's not so much about what ideas do you have coming in. It's what are you able to pivot with when things come up that are unforeseen, and can the people in power put their heads together and work for the best of everyone? Because so much, Tony Mussina's wife told me this. I was actually talking to her about real life. We were talking about flooring, and she said 95% of what you guys do has nothing to do with party. And I think Tony's held this position for 12 years. But when it's about bridges, or whether it's about the levee, or whether it's about the emergency medical system, if you're having a stroke, or someone is having a heart attack, and when the ambulance is coming, you don't care if the person driving the rig votes red, votes blue, is independent. You don't care. And the vast majority of stuff we do, we don't vote on Roe versus Wade. We don't vote on the border at Texas. There's so much of the national stuff that really gets people's blood boiling, and we don't do that. We're just trying to run the county business. We're trying to hire and fire and make sure that the infrastructure is as good as can be, and we want to increase the level of productivity for industry and just for the economic advancement of the area. So then when the top is thriving, now we can support the programs of the people who really need the support. And we know those programs exist as well. But it needs to be a balance. We can't just cater to one side and ignore the other side, or society's not going to thrive.
Are there any issues or priorities you haven't touched on yet that you would like to?
I mentioned this the other day, that I think one of the things that they always talk about is trying to keep our best and our brightest here. And so many of them are leaving because of greater opportunity in the big cities. And I think there's always going to be greater opportunities in the big cities, especially depending on what field of study you go into. And one of the things that I mentioned at one of the county commissioner meetings a couple weeks ago was maybe we could do a better job of going to the urban colleges and finding those kids that are looking for environmental or the outdoor recreation and things like that, because we're always going to have kids that grow up here that want to go to the city, but there's kids in the city that want to come here. And to better promote or advertise what we have here, I think as a county we need to promote and boast our outdoor recreation and how much money it actually brings to the area. And because of where we're situated here at Lycoming County, they call it the Southern Gateway. There's so much state game land. One of the things I never realized till I was in real estate was when you just figure in Pennsylvania, there's state game land everywhere. And when you actually look at a map, most of it is in the north. A lot of it is above us. When you go to the southern part of the state, there's not nearly as much. So when people want to hike and fish and the rails to trails and all those things, there's so much of it up here. And Williamsport is like the last city, and Lycoming County has this port where people will stay here, or if they do go up north, they'll come here to shows and they'll come here because there's just so much more opportunity. So the thing that we have going forever, Little League Baseball and the outdoor recreation, when you just look at the map, we are positioned perfectly to capitalize on that. And it is one of the benefits that we've seen coming out of COVID is people's rebirth to the outdoors and to understanding, what what nature has for us and what these outdoor activities are. Because during COVID, when that's all they could do was go ride their bike or go hike or go things, they had to get away from people. And we are really positioned well to capitalize on that, not only now, but for the extended future, because of just where the map lays and where Williamsport sits compared to the state game land. So that's something that as a county, we need to really put money. When people talk tourism, when I was a little kid, I'd always hear how much money Little League brings in. And we know that, Little League brings money every year, but just how much nature brings to the county. And we really need to capitalize that as best we can, because that's our one resource that's never going away.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Mussina, and I hope you have a great week.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me.